So, as we walk through the heart and going over those chambers that we discussed a little bit more in depth, we're going to start on the right side and then work our way to the left. Okay, so we're starting with the right atrium. And in these imagery, we have, of course, anterior view and posterior view. So, with the right atrium, we are going to be receiving deoxygenated blood from three specific locations. Deoxygenated blood meaning it does not have oxygen in it. Okay, awesome. So, blood is going to enter the right atrium from the systemic circuit via the superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, and the coronary sinus. Okay, so the coronary sinus is, of course, running along the anterior and posterior side of the heart. That's what the coronary sinus is, what runs through the coronary sulcus, right, separating the atria from the ventricles. And then the superior and inferior vena cava is also abbreviated as such. We can see here, okay, so this right here, this superior structure vessel, this is the superior vena cava. And down here, you have the inferior, okay? On the posterior side, here is the superior, and here is the inferior, okay? So these are considered veins, right? If it's going towards the heart and draining into the heart is going to be receiving blood from veins. Okay. Awesome. So now we can also see them from the cadaver view as well. This is kind of what it'll look like for the inferior vena cava here. And it looks like this right here would be the superior. Okay. And this is, of course, the coronary sulcus. Coronary sinus within the coronary sulcus, right here on both sides, anterior, and this is posterior. Okay, so again, those three structures draining into the right atrium. And so we can have like a little window here as well. Super helpful. Okay, so when we're looking at the right atrium, we have to remember that there is a structure called an auricle on top of the atrium. And there's a right auricle and a left auricle. Okay, so this little structure right here kind of looks a little bit different than the rest of the external of the heart. We may be able to see it a little bit better on the anterior side here. Yep. So this is the auricle. Okay, so you can kind of see it's a little bit different in texture than the rest of the surface of the heart. The auricle, I like to think of, these are like little backpacks for the atria. Okay, they're going to be essentially reservoirs. They just allow the atria to have higher capacity of blood. Okay, so we have this auricle, fantastic, and we can see where the superior and inferior are going to, vena cavas are going to be draining into the chamber. All right. Now, if we're looking on the inside of the right atrium, there's definitely a difference in texture. This is anterior and this is posterior. So we can tell that the texture of the walls of the endocardium definitely different. And that's because the anterior wall has this muscle called pectinate muscles. Okay. And pectinate muscles are going to assist with contractions of the atria. Okay. Then what we see right about here, that is the interatrial septum. So that is just going to be a wall separating the right atrium from the left atrium. Okay. And then we have something called a fossa ovalis. Fossa ovalis. And this is a remnant structure from something called the foramen ovale, which was a literal opening in the fetal heart. And then it closes right after birth. And then we have this remnant, this little fossa about right here. Okay, so fossa ovalis. And then separating the right atrium and the right ventricle, all the chambers are going to be separated by ventricles, essentially. All the chambers are going to be separated by valves. So sorry. We have something called the tricuspid valve. So separates the atria and the ventricle, the right atrium and the right ventricle. Okay. If it's separating the atria and the ventricle, it's classified as an atrioventricular valve. Specifically on the right side, separating the right atrium and the right ventricle, it's called the tricuspid valve. And that's what we're trying to show right here. But here is a clear view of all of those structures we were just talking about. So we were focusing right here on the right atrium. So we can't see the auricle, but that's all right. It would be sitting over here. But we are going to be receiving blood from the systemic circuit from the superior vena cava, the inferior vena cava, as well as coronary sinuses. We can see that remnant of the foramen ovale from the fetal heart to the fossa ovalis right here. And we can see kind of the lining of that pectinate muscle on the anterior side. The anterior wall of the heart has been essentially removed for this view, right? So you can see remnants of that pectinate muscle from the anterior side. And then separating the atrium, the right atrium and the ventricle here, you have a valve. Okay, and that is the tricuspid valve. Here we have on the cadaver, here we can see clearly the pectinate muscles on the anterior side. Fantastic, superior vena cava. And we kind of have a window into the right ventricle right here. And the cusps of the tricuspid valve are in clear view. Okay, so let's dive into the right ventricle. So this view is a really nice little snapshot of what we're about to identify, right? And here we have some clear, cartoon images as well as a cadaver image. Okay, so when you're looking at the right ventricle from the anterior external side of the heart, it essentially is the majority of the anterior surface of the heart. So all of this right here. Okay, and so we can make a window on the anterior side, and essentially that's the entire anterior surface. Awesome. Now, if we're looking at the right ventricle, okay, let's say we were following the flow of blood. So blood would move from the right atrium through the tricuspid valve, which we see, into the right ventricle. Now, the walls of the right ventricle are going to be lined with these raised bundles of muscle called trabeculae carnae. And that's what we're looking at here. All of these ridges, this is trabeculae carnae. Okay, so the atrium had pectinate muscles on the anterior side, and in the ventricle, we have trabeculae carnae. Okay. If we have like raised cone-shaped portions of trabeculae carnae, we can see that we get these little pillars, these little peaks. These are called papillary muscles. Okay, so those are the little papillary muscles. And what happens there is chordae tendineae, which we're looking at here, chordae tendineae, which extend off of the tricuspid valve, connect to the papillary muscles, and they help with closing the valves. Okay. We do have an interventricular septum, which is going to be the wall between the right ventricle and the left ventricle. And then we can think about how blood is going to move out of the right ventricle. When it moves out of the right ventricle, it's going to go to the pulmonary circuit. So it's going to go to the lungs. So because it's going to the pulmonary circuit, the valve and the vessels taking the blood and blood passing through are going to be called pulmonary as well. So pulmonary ventricle sends blood through something called the pulmonary semilunar valve, or abbreviated with just pulmonary valve right here, into the pulmonary trunk, which then leads to the pulmonary artery. Okay. If we're moving blood out of the heart, we're moving blood through an artery. Papillary muscles, right? So again, papillary muscle would be this cone-like structure. It's just a bundle of trabeculae carneae right here as well. And the chordae tendineae attached from the valve here, the tricuspid valve attached to the papillary muscle. Okay, so here we can see the pulmonary trunk and how it branches into the pulmonary arteries. There's a left pulmonary artery and a right pulmonary artery, and that'll go to the lungs. So we have a left lung and we have a right lung. So we will have two of those arteries. And again, if it's moving away from the heart, it's an artery. Okay, so pulmonary trunk, pulmonary artery, moving blood away. Okay, so here we can see another clear view of those structures. So blood goes into the right atrium, right, from the systemic circuit. It moves through the tricuspid valve. We can see chordae tendineae, these just like little tendon-like cords coming off of the valve. They're going to attach themselves to bundles of trabeculae carneae called papillary muscles, right? And these are all going to help with closing the valve. Blood will then move from the right ventricle, and it'll go through the pulmonary semilunar valve, or just pulmonary valve, to the pulmonary trunk, and it'll go to the pulmonary artery, or left pulmonary artery, or the right pulmonary artery. Okay. And again, we can see that clear view of the papillary muscle, the chordae tendineae coming off of the tricuspid valve, attaching, and we have the blood going to go through that pulmonary semilunar valve and then the pulmonary trunk. Here we have the posterior side so that we can get a very clear view of those right pulmonary arteries and left pulmonary arteries. Now, maybe you're thinking, why are the arteries shown in blue? That's a really good question. Excellent observation. Because typically, and I've said this before, typically arteries are going to be shown in the color red, whereas veins are shown in the color blue. But that's not really the case. The colors, red and blue, are actually denoting the presence of oxygen. So let's remember, when blood was coming into the right atrium, it was deoxygenated. Okay, so the structures, the vena cavas, are blue because it was lacking oxygen. Okay, it moves through the right side of the heart, goes up through the pulmonary valve, and then it's going into these pulmonary arteries via the pulmonary trunk. But why is the structure still blue? Well, it didn't pick up any oxygen. All it did was travel through the right side of the heart. it was deoxygenated when it came in, it's still going to be deoxygenated when it's leaving. Remember that the pulmonary trunk and the pulmonary arteries are bringing blood to the pulmonary circuit, which is bringing blood to the lungs. From there, it'll pick up oxygen. Okay. So the pulmonary vessels here are typically the case where the red and blue don't line up with artery versus vein. So we have to think of it as blue, deoxygenated blood, red, showing that that vessel is going to have oxygenated blood. So looking at this view, let's just kind of test ourselves for a second. Can we find the right ventricle? Is the right ventricle in view? Can we see the right and left pulmonary arteries? Okay, so because we're on the posterior side, we can see that this is the inferior vena cava going into the right atrium. It could be assumed that this little tiny sliver right here is the right ventricle. But again, it's more so the anterior surface of the heart, and this is the posterior. Okay. And in terms of right and left pulmonary arteries, right here, this is going to be the right pulmonary artery, and this is the left pulmonary artery. These structures down here, we'll talk about it momentarily, but these are pulmonary veins. Okay, so the arteries are up closer to the they're more superior to the veins. Okay, the arteries are more superior to the pulmonary veins. All right. And then if you were still having a little trouble, you could look for the ligamentum arteriosum and see, oh, okay, that ligament is present there. So that is showing the connection between something we call the aorta and those pulmonary arteries. And we'll talk about what that ligament means throughout this chapter, but we can see it here showing, okay, yeah, so that would be the pulmonary arteries.